years, people have developed very novel ways of stopping me from singing. This is the best that they've come up with. I'm going to do a couple of poems of Seamus Heaney's, as Peter said, in memory of his passing. And the two poems, of one now and one a bit later on, are two poems that sort of bookend his life. The first poem we'll read to you is a poem that was the first poem in his very first collection, and maybe one of his most famous poems, which is Digging. It wasn't his first poem, but it was the first in the collection, and he develops in that a number of themes that were later to be echoed in much of his later work. And the first of those themes is his life in rural Derry, and how he used that as a stepping stone to talk about wider and deeper themes of his life. And the second one I've mentioned is that he develops a theme about distance, about being in familiar places, but actually being separate from them. And this was something, I think, as he seen himself as a poet, standing within a situation, but also somehow standing above it and outside it. And in this particular poem, he talks about his relationship with his father and his grandfather, who were farmers in South Derry, dairyman, but also a sense of regret that he couldn't really follow them into farming, that wasn't really his skill, but that he said maybe by writing, by using the pen, perhaps he was as good as those who hold a spade. So this is Digging by Seamus Heaney. Between my finger and thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean, rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging. I look down till his stringy rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stripping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse bit nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee and levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. My God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in one day than any other man on Toner's Bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, and then fell right away, nicking, slicing neatly, heavy sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. The cold smell of potato mould, the swelsh and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. So this second last poem, Seamus Heaney's, is one that's certainly my favourite poem of everything that he's written, and was privileged enough to hear him read it at the All Ireland Fleadh back in the summer, just a few weeks before he died. And in it, there are a number of things which he's reflecting on. So he's now sort of he wrote a few years ago, and he's reflecting on his life. He's done all his degrees and he's done his honorary professorships in Harvard and Oxford, and he's come back to stay in the Wicklow Hills, and he's sitting outside his house there in his car, and he sees a blackbird in the hedge, and then he reminisces on this blackbird and his life and his death. So somewhat ironically that he was to die a few weeks after I heard him read this poem, but also he reflects back on the death of his brother, who he wrote one of his first poems about midterm break. His brother was 4 years old and he was 11 or 12 at boarding school, and this poem calls back to his brother's death and also looks forward to his own death. But ready to scare off at the very first wrong move, in the ivy when I leave, it's you, blackbird, I love.
I park, pause, take heed, breathe, just breathe and sit, and lines I once translated come back. I want away to the house of death, to my father under a low clay roof. And I think of one gone to him, a little stillness dancer, haunter son, lost brother, cavorting through the yard, so glad to see me home, my homesick first term over. And I think of a neighbour's words long after the accident. Yon bird up on the shed roof, up on the ridge for weeks. I said nothing at the time, but I never liked yon bird. The automatic lock clunks shut. The blackbird's panic is short-lived. For a second, I've a bird's eye view of myself, a shadow on wrecked gravel in front of my house of life. Hedgehop, I am absolute for you. Your ready talk back, your each standoffish comeback, your picky, nervy gold beak. On the grass when I arrive, in the ivy when I leave. Thanks.